You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 133 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is my podcast partner in crime, writer, journalist, TV personality, Jessica Szilagyi.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, another good day above ground. How was your week?
It was fine. How was your week?
It's good. It was good. It was hot.
I was about to say, it was, super hot down here too, 98.
Yeah, I mean, it's September in Georgia, so naturally it's pumpkin spice lattes and, 98-degree temperatures.
Yeah, please don't have your pumpkin spice latte ruin the smell of my margarita because it's still hot.
Exactly. And, of course, Home Depot's already got Halloween, not costumes, but decorations out.
Of course they do.
By October, they'll have Christmas out.
No, you go.
We want to mention Big Daddy Unlimited, the sponsor for our show. They are a direct source membership club for everything fun, guns, class 3 items, accessories, all sorts of stuff, knives, anything that's outdoor related, shooting sports related, you're going to find on Big Daddy Unlimited, anything that's available. Ammunition, stuff that may be hard to find, particularly if your gun store options where you live are a mom and pop shop or Walmart. You might be able to find that ammunition that you can't just pick up off the shelf at Big Daddy Unlimited, and you could try it for 99 cents for the first month. If it doesn't work out for you, you send them a message, say, go ahead and cancel my membership. It is super easy to do. They're super easy to check out, super affordable checkout. After that, I think it's $10 a month. And if you are the kind of person that is into shooting sports, that $10 absolutely pays for itself. So we want to give a big thanks to Big Daddy Unlimited. To start the show, we had a callback from last week, and I mean this came out hours after we recorded. We briefly spoke about our views on the death penalty. And it came across a story out of Florida where a man spends 37 years in prison for a rape and murder he did not commit.
Disgusting. Heartbreaking.
37 years is longer than you've been on the planet.
It is. And you lose all sense of society and how to be a member of society. It's so hard to get the restitution from the state and compensation. They make it impossible. If they're, even if, for any reason, no matter how wronged you were. But I mean, you've missed the opportunity to have a family, raise a family, anything. And what's always, I know this isn't the point of you adding it to it, but it's always miraculous to me to see how humble and kind and unfocused on being bitter and angry about what happened to them these people are after they're exonerated. I mean, they're just grateful and their faith got them through, or some other spiritual grounding, and it's remarkable. They're remarkable people with incredible stories, and they've been so wronged, and most of us have something way less happen to us on a daily basis, and we spend way more time being ticked off about it.
Yeah, this is a guy who spent nearly 4 decades in prison. And look, by all rights, if someone had raped and murdered somebody that I loved, I'd want blood. And had this happened at least 15 years ago, he would have been executed. And the fact is, had he been executed, we never would have known. And there'd be no reason to have the Innocence Project working on it or anything else. We never would have known. It just would have gone in the history books as a convicted felon, a murderer was executed on such and such a date. So the fact that we were able to at least restore the last maybe 3 decades of his life is something that you don't get when the state executes somebody and executes them wrongly. I want to say improperly, completely wrong. The state would have murdered this man.
And as much as you say, you would want blood and all this other stuff, most reasonable people, even through their pain and agony of having someone taken from them, don't want the wrong person executed, which we talked about Ray Cromartie in Georgia, who was executed with a ton of doubt. And the family of the victim pleaded, not that because they believed him, they just said, please do more testing because we want to be sure. We don't want another life lost because of the system and all of this too. That would be even more of a travesty and not in our mother's name. State obviously refused and he was executed anyway, but families, the ones who are wrong, the true victims, not the state, they want that assurance. And when they can't have it, they understand that they don't have it. And so therefore life in prison is the best they can get.
And at least with life in prison, we get a chance to, I can't say make it right, but expose the wrongs. So we have a callback from a little further back. If you recall the story of Savannah, where a 44-year-old marathon runner, Thomas Calloway, smacked the behind of TV reporter Alex Bazorjan, and I probably murdered her name, on live TV. He was arrested for the offense and charged with sexual battery.
We talked about it.
After it may...
Right? We talked about that on the show.
Yeah, we did. It made national news. He apologized, said he didn't mean to smack her butt, but she instead her back or shoulder. Now, I mean, something's happened. If you give someone a hug, sometimes you reach too low and you go, oops. I mean, running through. I mean, if you're trying to pat somebody on the shoulder versus smack him on the ass, there's a huge. I mean, his aim must be really off. He needs to go ahead and move his hand scope up 3 clicks. If that's the case. He says, I got caught in the moment. I was getting ready to bring my hands up and wave at the camera to the audience. There was a misjudge in character and decision making. And
we've called it into question and speculated on our own opinions. And of course, it was a poor decision. I think our discussion really centered around whether or not it rose to a criminal act, and then on top of that, a sexually motivated criminal act, or, intentional or not. So he clearly admitted, he pled guilty. He pled guilty to misdemeanor sexual battery. And he admitted in court that he was wrong after he had apologized. But that's not enough, it seems.
He was sentenced to a year on probation, fined $1,000 in order to do 200 hours of community service, according to records filed with the Chatham County Recorder's Office. It is Chatham, right?
Chatham.
Mm-hmm. Georgian was just as dramatic, as always, saying about it, all I really hope is that going forward in the future, that's which is repetitive and redundant, he will do better. While I understand that this has probably disrupted his life more than he ever imagined, nobody has the right to touch anybody or slap anybody for their own amusement. Good Lord.
My issue with her statement is, yes, it did disrupt his life. His face was everywhere. He lived in Bullock, or I don't know if he still does or not, but he lived in Bullock County. He had a job here, had a family. I believe he worked at a church for a while, or maybe he was a deacon. I don't recall, but he definitely had roots in the community, and it disrupted would be an understatement. I don't necessarily have a problem with that from the standpoint of, actions have consequences, and he did choose whether he meant to hit her on the behind or the back or the shoulder or whatever. He did grab her or smack her, and that was not right. But there's no evidence that he's done this before, and clearly allowing him to plead to 1 year probation and $1,000 fine and 200 hours of community service for a misdemeanor crime that I don't believe, unless he violates his probation, puts him on the registry. Clearly, the court felt confident that he's not going to do this again. And I don't understand why she had to comment anyway. But she did, and that's her right, and whatever.
Well, she makes her living, in the Fish Islands. So she wants the attention. I guarantee you, she wants to raise her profile to get out of South Georgia and into a larger market where she can make more money and report on things besides a marathon. As Don Henley said, dirty laundry. I have a real problem with putting sexual in front of the battery. Of course, I don't know how hard he smacked her. I mean, even if he really smacked her, the back wouldn't be appropriate either. I don't know that it's battery. It's just not appropriate. But, I mean, sexualizing stuff that's not sexual is a problem, especially when you do it in the courts. It's just not. I don't think he was doing it for anyone's sexual gratification. So the idea that it's a sexual battery, I really have a problem. Even if they hit him with simple assault or something like that, or just embarrass the snot out of him on the news, is as much punishment as $1,000 fine.
Mm-hmm. Probably, most people would probably much rather pay the fine than have to deal with all that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, can I pay something to make this go away? I also don't like using community service as punishment.
How come?
Kind of cheapens. I just don't. It cheapens the idea of community service. It's not community service. It's compulsory.
No, it's like,
yeah, can't even talk.
In Guyton, they call it a work gang. It's in their ordinance as a work gang.
Well, at least that's more accurate than community service. Community service is something you do for the community. It's not something that you're sentenced to. But whatever. Hopefully, this will disappear and he can move on with his life. I didn't read anywhere where his wife left him, but he certainly is going to have a hard time finding gainful employment down there, and he can't go anywhere for a year. He's on probation.
I was just going to say it's unfortunate. The whole thing is unfortunate, and I hope that this kind of puts an end to it, though, because nothing productive is going to come out of it for true victims, for him, for her, for the situation. It's one of those stories that, like, hopefully this is the conclusion and we don't have to hear about it again.
Well, now it's precedent is the problem.
True.
As much as I look at the one case and say that's probably not appropriate, it is now precedent. It has now been set that smacking an ass is sexual battery. And if you apply that for a man smacking a woman's ass, you have to apply it equally. So, I mean, if I walk behind one of my friends and smack him on the ass, he can hit me with sexual battery. In fact, I'll be meeting Matt Lowe later, and I'm going to do that, see if he charges me with sexual battery.
Lord.
He just might, knowing Lowe. Just to troll the courts.
How very Matt Lowe of him, taking everything to a new low.
Matt knew Lowe. Mm-hmm. Georgia County, at the center of the Ahmaud Arbery shooting, sues state to stop vote on abolishing the police department. And they make a pretty good case. So,
this is another Jackie Johnson story in a roundabout way. I think we've talked about this maybe briefly or in passing with some of the other Brunswick Judicial Circuit stories, but this is heating up, obviously, because the election is coming, and then, of course, because Kemp signed the law that they're suing over into effect earlier, I guess in August now. But anyway, the legislature passed a couple bills about giving voters in Glynn County the ability to eliminate their police department. They have a sheriff's office there. Then all the municipalities have police departments. And then Glynn County has its own police department as well. It was established several decades ago, and it was constitutional because counties are permitted to do that. I think there's a number in the state. It usually comes with bigger counties, more money, obviously, but it's a power that is allocated to the counties to do. Well, the narrative is that this happened because, while the legislature was adjourned for the COVID outbreak, we heard about the Ahmaud Arbery story and how the Glynn County Police Department supposedly sat on the case for 2 months and didn't do anything, and everyone was outraged. And so here comes the Georgia legislature saying, you can't have a police department anymore. And if the voters want to get rid of it, they can get rid of it. Sounds kind of noble. Of course, that's not really what's true, because last November, before anybody even knew who Ahmaud Arbery was, and before the Glynn County Police Department really even knew who Ahmaud Arbery was, Jackie Johnson took the issue before a grand jury and had a grand jury recommend that voters vote to eliminate the police department, and citing corruption and all of this stuff. Well, we've talked on the show about how Jackie Johnson is bringing cases against Glynn County police officers, former Glynn County police officers, for things that aren't crimes, and calling them, corrupt and all of these things. Like, we've talked about all of this on the show. And if you read All in Georgia, it's been covered in depth there. So I won't waste a whole lot of time there. But basically, in my opinion, it's a complete setup and a complete sham, because Jackie Johnson cannot control the Glynn County Police Department. She's in cahoots with the sheriff. She's in good graces with the municipalities. But the Glynn County Police Department is the same agency that has leaked lots of videos and audios of Jackie, documents, investigations, all of it. They leak stuff to the media all the time. So Jackie Johnson goes to her friends in the legislature and asks them to bring this before, and have them push the measure and put it on the ballot for this November. And I will say, if the voters want to get rid of their police department, I support that. I just don't support it for political reasons. And I don't support how the process has happened. I just don't think it should be initiated by someone who stands to gain from it. And if that's the will of the county, then they need to sort that out. But the position that the county is taking, and I think it's sound, is that the Georgia General Assembly cannot take back powers that they've given to county governments in the state constitution. And so they're saying that the county commissioners did not consent to this. None of them are in favor of getting rid of the police department. And so without their consent or approval, they cannot just put this on the ballot, order it to be put on the ballot. And then they're also arguing that Kemp signed the bill on August 5th, which was 90 days before the election, which is correct. But the Board of Elections wasn't formally notified until several days later, and that was not within the window of time. And so now they're in this dispute with the Secretary of State's office and the state, and they're suing the state. And honestly, it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money regardless. And it's all because of Jackie Johnson. If they want to bring this up again next year or in 2 years, I think that would be fine, but not at her pushing. And so I don't know. What do you think about the legislature basically ordering it to be put on the ballot?
Well, the term that they use here is patently unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the input of the people, putting it on the ballot as a ballot initiative is the input of the people. I think that satisfies the constitutional requirement, putting it on the ballot. The way it's being put on the ballot and the way it's being rushed is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The governor signed the order with exactly, was it 90 days before the election? And of course, that order did not get to the election board until less than that time for them to put it on the existing ballot. So
which is not their fault. That's not their fault to deny that, because if it was anything else, that would be denied. Just because the state is saying, well, the governor signed this law, does not override the requirement to have all of that in place in an order 3 months ahead of time.
Right. Then we're talking about a special election, which is costly to the county. Look, I don't have a problem with doing away with the county police department. I think it's a duplication of efforts, especially for counties like Paulding, where our sheriff's department handles the jail and road duties and law enforcement. And of course, the sheriff has the authority to take that power back from the police department himself.
That's right. At any time.
Right. If he or she believes that the police department is corrupt, that he's got credible information. He doesn't need a reason. He can just do it.
Yeah, he can cease to recognize them as a legitimate law enforcement entity.
Right. The problem with doing it this way, and generally I don't like ballot initiatives because I don't like the way they're written. Mm-hmm. They're written with an agenda. Look at any SPLOST or eSPLOST with educational special purpose optional sales tax, whatever it is. They write it, do you like children and puppies or do you hate them? So the way these ballot initiatives are written is misleading in and of itself. And I guarantee you more than half the people voting on that ballot initiative are going to think that they're defunding the police. It's not replacing their existing law enforcement, but defunding the police. The process is wrong. Yeah, the process is wrong. It's the wrong way to do it. There are existing processes in place to eliminate that department. The sheriff can do it. The county commissioners can do it. And if the people, us being a representative republic, decide that's what they want, then they will run candidates for their county commission that support giving the law enforcement duties over to the sheriff and eliminating the duplicated effort that a county police department offers. But of course, that sheriff needs ramp up time. He doesn't have road deputies. I mean, I'm sure he has some SWAT. I'm sure he has some fugitive recovery guys or warrant processing departments. But generally speaking, these non-law enforcement sheriffs they run the jail. They of course they take care of the courthouse and all the other duties that fall on the sheriff, but he doesn't have the number of post-qualified deputies necessary to hop in and take over the county.
Yeah, I don't know what his office looks like. Honestly, I've largely kind of ignored that component just because Jackie Johnson is such a monster-size issue to take on in every sense of the word. But you're right that. I mean, and I'm sure that it's not like it would pass if it passed on November 3rd. On November 4th, there wouldn't be a police department. There would be a transition period and all this other stuff. But at the same time, there's been some preliminary polls about all of this, even as the conversation about defunding the police has come about. And there's a huge divide in the community because of Jackie Johnson and because of all this bad publicity and things like that. And there is a large segment of the population, and based on the polls, the independent polls, right now, it does not seem like the people want to get rid of the police department. And if they want to be taxed at that level, God bless them, so be it. Like first of all, they have St. Simon's and a lot of money down there as well because of the beach and Brunswick and the tourist component. But if that is their prerogative to have that level of service and they feel more comfortable having patrol and calls for domestics and all that answered by the Glynn County Police Department, I don't think the legislature should step in and try to jimmy rig that.
Well, this is one of the times where it's not the legislators' place to do that. There are processes in place to eliminate that department without the state getting involved. And look, if Jackie Johnson is against that police department, they can't be that damn bad. And I know a stop clock is right twice a day, but if Jackie Johnson is that vocal about opposing it, it really can't be that bad.
Yeah, they've got problems, just like every other law enforcement agency in the state and every other government entity in the state. And they've had some people in their agency do some really stupid things, just like everywhere else. And if, from the perspective of the only other component that I really just oppose here is that it's only for Glynn County. If they were going to put this on every ballot across the state and go from there, I could see how the state would have a little bit more authority. Like if there was a movement to see if voters no longer wanted their county police department and give them that option this November. But we're only talking about Glynn County, and they're covering it up as if it has to do with the Arbery shooting, and it doesn't. It's strictly political, and that's gross.
Yes, it is. You're right. The legislature has no place getting involved in a single county's issues. That's for the voters, and that's for the county commissioner, and that's for the sheriff of that county to work out. They need to get the hell back in their box. They've got enough things to worry about without getting involved in a single county. I mean, God almighty, just do your damn job. You complain there's not enough time up there as it is. Why get involved in this other than to try to appease Jackie Johnson? Which, if there's any justice in the world, she won't have her job much longer.
Bleh.
A survivor and descendants of the 1921 Tulsa massacre seeks reparations in a lawsuit. The group of Oklahomans, led by 105-year-old survivor Leslie Bennington Randall, alleged in a lawsuit that Tulsa's current racial and economic disparities can be tracked back to the nearly century-old incident, and that city is unjustly enriching itself by trying to profit off the massacre in what was known as the Greenwood District.
What do you think about this? So apparently I didn't, and this is my own ignorance on this issue. I'd heard of the massacre, but I didn't know that there had been attempts to have lawsuits for this reason previously. So this is news to me, but, I mean, are you familiar with the massacre?
I am. It was a huge black mark on the history, particularly of Oklahoma. On May 31st, 1921, a white mob looted, burned, and destroyed the Greenwood District after a black man was accused of assaulting a white woman, which the charges were later dropped. They torched homes, churches, schools, and a hospital, according to a 2001 Oklahoma Commission a report prepared for the state legislature, which was the Race Riot Commission, as I recall. The following day, they returned, supposedly with the support of local authorities and police, and members of the black community were shot, tortured, and killed. 35 city blocks ultimately destroyed, an estimated 300 people died. And again, they don't know how many people died. I've seen estimates between 1 and 300. I have also seen reports that they deputized all white people in response to this. And a lot of those people who were deputized were the ones involved in the riot or in the burning and the looting and the massacre. Black folks were also rounded up and interned during this unrest. The National Guard came in, and there were some internment areas. I won't say camps, but and the folks were interned for up to, I think it was 8 days. That the government held citizens of this country, free men and women in this country, without due process, without a trial, just simply held them. And there were like 2 or 3 places. They said that the bodies were put into mass graves. The mass graves have yet to be found from the last reports that I read, that they're ongoing efforts. Of course, this is 100 years old to find the mass graves because they were unmarked and actually get an accurate count. Of course, particularly in the black community, a lot of and just in the 20s in general, we didn't keep birth records. I mean, census, we had a census, but when a baby was born, you opened up the family Bible and you wrote the name in there. When you got married, you opened up the family Bible and you wrote a name in there. So our records are somewhat spotty when it comes to exactly how many people were injured, how many people were dead.
And it's terrible. Like, I mean, you hear about it, and it's like one of those, if you read anything other than what we've told you, like that some of the accounts, it makes you cringe, and it's awful. But who are they suing? Are they
Right.
suing the
Now,
people who did this? Not directly.
Right. That's the deal. Is the Greenwood district was known as Black Wall Street. It was a very affluent area. Of course, this is a time of Jim Crow, time of segregation. So there was a black area town, a white area town. But this was a relatively affluent area of African American businesses, a theater district. I mean, it was the Roaring 20s in Oklahoma. There was. I think this is not dissimilar from what happened in Germany, where there was a lot of jealousy, a lot of anger that I don't have money. You talk about a lot of poor farmers. I don't have money, but they do. That may have led to this. But they're suing Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Regalago, whatever. He doesn't listen. He won't be offended. The Tulsa County Commission, the Tulsa Regional Chamber, and the Oklahoma Military District Department.
Not a fan.
I'm wondering what the sheriff did.
Unless it's the same sheriff who deputized everybody back in 1921, I ain't got a problem with naming the sheriff specifically. That's not fair.
No. Again, even the survivor that is named in this is 105 years old, which means that she was 5 or 6 when this happened. Even the memories of this event would be very spotty. Now, I'm sure growing up and over the years, she has heard plenty of stories from her relatives and neighbors and everybody else who was old enough to remember it as she was growing up and becoming an adult, where that may have filled in some of the gaps in the memory. One of the reasons that eyewitnesses are so unreliable is because our memories can be influenced by others. So I don't know how much you remember from being 5 years old. I mean, I have bits and pieces of memories from being 5, 6 years old, but I certainly couldn't piece together an entire event from it. But I'm sure she got the oral history of it from her parents. This goes back to defending the worst but none of these people that sit on the county commission, certainly nobody in the regional chamber had anything to do with it.
Well, and the claim is that there's multiple claims. It's a rather lengthy lawsuit with lots of stipulations, but they're saying that, one, they were promised reparations years ago and didn't get them, but that the city and institutions generally blocked community efforts to rebuild and then neglected the community over decades. And then they're saying that it's still going on because there's some of it that's been memorialized to, I guess, recognize and not commemorate. That's not the right word, but preserve what's left the knowledge of what happened in 1921. So, and it's part of a museum. And so they're saying that the city is profiting off of that and made it a tourist attraction.
Most museums, especially municipal museums, don't turn a profit.
Yeah.
They usually make enough, or usually don't even make enough to cover operating expenses, and it's subsidized by the taxpayers. So I don't see where the county is just going to make a ton of money from out of $5 or $10 at the turnstile to go in and get a piece of history.
And they did say that they would like the money to be put into a victim's compensation fund, which I'm not sure. I mean, there's only one victim. The descendants are not victims. They may have been disadvantaged by the circumstances of their parents or grandparents or whatever the case may be, but that is true for everybody. So, I mean, we're judged by the sins of our fathers and those before us and everything else. So, but if they wanted to put it into a fund to improve a special district within the community, I don't have a problem with that, like the proceeds of the museum and things like that. And that way people could donate if they wanted to as well. That's the only part of the lawsuit that I could get on board with.
And look, it was a horrible piece of history in this country, especially for Oklahoma. It was, absolutely awful. It was our version of Glasnost, where just everything that belonged to a person of color was burned down, was destroyed. And again, a lot of it was jealousy. A lot of it was anger over economic disparity. It's not dissimilar from what we're seeing now. They were just angry, and it wasn't anything these folks did. And they used the excuse of a charge against a black man for assaulting a white woman. And from what I read, he shared an elevator with her. And this is all where the assault charge comes from. And it was later found to be unsubstantiated and was released.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about a time when the jury would be all white. The voters would be largely white. So why wouldn't a district attorney, if he had a case, not move forward with prosecuting somebody?
Right.
So I have to believe that the accusations were baseless, but they were used as an excuse to go ahead and fire up the tinderbox. You know, I certainly think a lot of the things that are alleged in this are a lot of things quoted really bother me, like the white people in Tulsa live on average 11 years longer than black people. Those kind of statistics are useless in an argument because so much personal choice goes into how long you live. Obesity, choices like smoking, drinking, drug use, all those things that and crime. Honestly, if you join a gang, your life expectancy isn't very long. But when you use race as the only factor to break down statistics, it's absolutely useless. Socioeconomic is such a better indicator to when you start looking at actuaries than just race. Because being black does not mean you die. You just naturally die earlier. There's so many other factors that go into it, and so much of it is socioeconomic. If you have money, you could obviously afford better health care. You also if you have money, you could afford better education. And those who are better educated tend to make better personal choices with things like smoking, drinking, drug use. Right. I'm not saying nobody with a college degree has never done a line of cocaine. I'm just saying that the on average, you're going to see poorer people making poor decisions, and you're going to see more illicit drug use within a class of people that has less education, less money, and less opportunity. They also quote, unemployment rate among black people in Tulsa is more than double that of whites. The median household income for black residents is half of that of white residents. Well, those two numbers kind of go together. Black students are 9 times more likely to be suspended from school, and then, of course, the life expectancy. And then you mentioned the 2003 federal suit was dismissed after the judge decided the victims waited too long to file it.
Which, I mean, you can kind of understand.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2003, you're talking about 82 years after the incident. 8 decades that they had the opportunity to file a lawsuit. Even if we're talking file in the 60s, file in the 70s, we still have a group of victims that are alive to stand up in court and talk about what happened. 100 years later, you're talking about oral history and some grainy black and white photos. Of course, these are our opinions and not necessarily those of All on Georgia, and certainly not those of any All on Georgia reporter not offering commentary on this show. And of course, none of our opinions should reflect anything upon our sponsor, Big Daddy Unlimited. The topic that had Jessica hollering all week, the CDC's eviction memorandum, threatens landlords with a $100,000 fine and a year in jail for non-compliance. Jessica, why are you so pissed off?
Because this is stupid. And it's total government overreach. It's market manipulation. It's going to have impacts way worse than what we're facing right now. And if you've done any research, if you just Google like any type of any eviction numbers in any state in this nation right now, it's a answer for a problem that doesn't exist. Because landlords generally are doing their best to work with tenants who can pay something, because something is better than having an empty condo or house or apartment or whatever the case may be. So I'm just disgusted. I'm disgusted that people are talking about the CDC doing this when there was an executive order several weeks ago where Trump directed the CDC and other health officials to do this. And we're talking like this is the right thing to do just because they're authorized to do it. Like this is somehow the proper role of government and a Republican thing to do. I'm just every little thing, like I was doing research for it, and every time I read an article or got another bullet point, I was even more ticked off.
Of course, no, this was Nancy Pelosi, right? This couldn't be Trump. I mean, only somebody like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer would get in the middle of a private contract and dictate the terms under which you can collect compensation under that private contract. That's not a Republican talking point.
Sure, that's true. I forgot. My bad.
Couldn't possibly be our Lord and Savior Trump.
Ugh.
Look, this is why I say the Republican Party left me. This is absolutely buying people off. This is absolutely keeping evictions out of the news before November. This is using government. This is not being kind to anyone. This isn't helping anybody. Look, this defers payments until what, January?
It does.
So
and you use the perfect word. Thank you. Defers.
Yeah, let's use easy math because I'm an idiot. Say your rent's $1,000 a month. So if you don't have to pay rent or it's deferred, you can't afford the $1,000 a month. How in the hell are you going to come up to $5,000 in January?
Well, that's a great question, Dave, because it's not just the rent. If you're late or don't pay at all and there's penalties and interest, that's all accruing. There's nothing that stops that. And there's nothing, hopefully people have sound rental agreements with their landlords. I know that when I had an apartment, I always had great, it was a corporate entity. So it was pretty concrete of what everybody's obligations and privileges were. But if you don't have that kind of thing outlined, there's no cap on how much the fees can be, how many times they can be assessed, the penalties, the interest, none of that. None of that is outlined here. And what's even crazier is that there's nothing in the directive that says when a person can file it. So if I'm the landlord and you're not paying and you miss it you're 45 days late and I want to start the eviction process, I can go ahead and go to the court and file it. They are not going to start it, but I'll be first in line when it opens back up on January 1. And that's going to, you think you're telling me that after the holidays, people are going to be in a better position? Please.
And look, nobody is served by this. It delays the inevitable. So now instead of having to find something in August or September, now you're out at a lot of parts of the country. Now you're homeless in January.
Which is a difficult time to buy, sell, find a place to rent. Because people the housing market in general is kind of takes a dip at that time because people don't want to move during the holidays. So there's not a whole lot of transition in that type anyway. So where are you going to go?
Not just that. If I look at your rental history, I said, well, give me some references of rental history, and you haven't paid rent in 5 months, and then you're trying to move into my property?
Mm-hmm.
Go fornicate yourself. I'm not renting my house to you. You owe that guy $5,000. Why in the hell would I move you into my house?
And this also stops evictions that are underway. So, if they've started the process, this took effect on Friday. If someone filed on Thursday or Wednesday of last week and for an eviction, you can't be evicted, which I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. At all.
Yeah, the CDC is overriding a piece of due process signed off by typically an elected judge. And they're going to step in and get in between that order and executing it.
If the government can and stop a private contract in this context where everybody has voluntarily participated, there's no scam involved. Like, it's not like you got duped or there was predatory lending or any type of those things where we hear where the government swoops in to save everybody. That's not what happened here. People voluntarily agreed to do something. And the government is saying, well, actually, all these mortgage holders have to keep paying their mortgage, which I'm not condemning that. I mean, you should. But the people who are renting it and helping them pay their mortgage, they're off the hook.
Yeah, what about Bob and Myrtle who have houses to supplement their retirement income? That's their retirement. And then people who own rental houses in 401ks and in IRAs, that's their retirement. Everybody who owns a rental house is not rich. Not everybody is Post Properties. Not everybody's a multi-billion-dollar international corporation that owns these houses. A lot of these are people who bought a house and had to move. And the military does it a lot, is you don't really have enough equity to move. So you go ahead and rent that house, let the renter pay the mortgage, and then you go off to your new post, especially with officers that change posts every few years as they make their way through the ranks.
Right.
They don't necessarily have the disposable income to pay that mortgage. They were letting the rent, pay the mortgage because either they were upside down in the house or there wasn't enough equity to really sell it. Or they say, hey, this is where I want to come back to. I'm going to rent this house for 10 years, and this is where we want to come back when I retire. All that is in play. And those are the people that are being hurt. These aren't, and again, it doesn't matter if they're rich. They shouldn't have to take the weenie just because they have a fat bank account. But there are working people out there who can't afford to pay additional mortgages for 5 months. And then when they actually do leave in January, do you think that rental house is be worth a damn? No, they're going to have to go invest more money into whatever's wrecked in that house, because tenants usually aren't all that polite when they know they're being thrown out. Mm-hmm. So they have to turn the house over. That's additional time without rent. And all they can do is go out there and sue or put a lien on the people that can't afford to damn pay you anyway. I thought he was supposed to be a businessman.
It's not good business, that's for sure.
I thought he was going to end the swamp. It sure does sound like a swamp monster thing to do. I'm more concerned with getting reelected than doing the right thing by the people that invest in these communities and offer rental homes and offer affordable housing to people.
Well, and, it stops residential evictions, but doesn't address commercial ones. And I'm not saying it should, but, I haven't supported what has happened to businesses, but as a nation, we have destroyed small businesses across the country, and they're not getting any assistance. I'm not saying they should, but it's not equitable under the law, and it doesn't make sense the way that they're implementing this, because while I wouldn't support it, at least if you were giving people housing assistance funds or making direct payments for someone on behalf of for their rent, at least you know that the right party. I mean, who is going to ever rent a home again to somebody after this? If the government can come in and say, we have a right to your property and you can no longer kick someone out of it because they are not compensating you, why would you ever lease a property again?
Right. Ultimately, it leads to a shortage of rental properties. Yes. And there are people that are
spike in rent.
Yeah, there are people that are highly mobile and need rental properties. There are people who I'm going to be working in Dallas for 2 years, so I'm going to get an apartment. And 2 years isn't long enough to buy something, but I'm just go ahead. I'm going to rent a house, and then after 2 years, bail. I've got to go move on to my next assignment. those houses are going to dry up, or they're going to be, like you said, so damn expensive because these owners have got to self-insure. They've got to make sure that if my mortgage is $1,000 a month, I got to make sure I'm charging $1,800 a month because I need to sock away some of those extra funds to cover the next time that's the Centers for Disease Control decide that I can't collect rent from somebody.
I can't find it now, but there's a section of a federal law, obviously, that gave the CDC the authority to do this. And of course, like everything else, here it is. It's Section 361 of the Public Health Service Act and any subsequent federal regulations. And it gives the CDC director the power to take any measures deemed, quote, reasonably necessary to prevent the interstate spread of communicable disease, including inspection, fumigation, disinfection, sanitation, pest extermination, and destruction of animals or articles believed to be sources of infection. And then by doing that puts the DOJ in the position to prosecute, which is a whole other problem because you're going to have landlords and companies who, if they push the limits at all, are going to be tied up in federal court. But
which jack lawyer of the administration went streaming through 1 million pages of laws to find this one and say this will work? Because this was not a. I mean, this is way misappropriated. It takes a lot of strings to tie this to telling landlords that they can't foreclose. That law was written for the idea of swine flu and that the CDC, if we can destroy livestock.
Right.
In the case of something like swine flu or something like chronic wasting disease or something like mad cow disease, something that gets loose in the livestock they're authorized to do that. This is a damn stretch. And the only reason that they're doing this is to keep evictions out of the news for November. That's the only reason it's being done.
But evictions aren't really happening. That was a totally made up thing. I mean, the George Mason University, there's a center that has been studying this since the start, and they said the data so far shows no indication of heightened rate of evictions. By acting prematurely, the administration is putting a heavy financial burden on housing providers and setting an unwise precedent. Obviously true. But like I said at the beginning, this is all subjective, and the historic averages in almost every state, even though like ones that lifted their moratoriums in June and ones that lifted them back in May, they're still not having just a flood of evictions because the landlords would rather take something than nothing and not have a vacant unit. And on top of all of that, you have the fact that the courts have been, you go. I'm going to start cussing. You go.
Look, well, here's the thing. Yeah, I would rather, as a landlord, rather take something. I don't want to have to turn over that unit. Turning over a unit is time consuming and time is money. It's also expensive. I've got to go back in. I've got to paint it. I've got to clean it. I've got to address any holes in the wall, everything from hanging a picture to you're moving a couch and put a dent in the wall. All that has to be fixed before I can turn that unit. A lot of times the carpet's got to be changed, or there's just so much that goes into turning a unit, even when the renter is relatively clean. There's a lot that goes into turning these units, and that's time. That's time I'm not collecting rent. So the average is probably a month. So that's already a downtime of a month. And if you haven't been paid for 2 months before that, that's now a quarter of a year income that you're missing on that property by the time you get somebody evicted, get it turned. Now we're talking about adding 5 months to that. And now I have to turn it. And I've got somebody for 5 months that knows that they're just going to ride the sucker out and wait to be evicted. Those folks don't typically take care of their property. This is an absolute overreach. When in modern history of politics has becoming more Democrat than your opponent worked for a Republican?
I don't believe it has.
Now, Trump is a different animal because he's a cult of personality and not of substance. People are fans of Trump. He doesn't have political supporters. He has fans. And it doesn't matter what he does. It's, oh, well, that's the right thing to do. Well, it had to be done. Oh, he knows what he's doing. He's playing 3D chess. Shut up. It's okay to point it. You can still vote for the man and say, this is wrong. You can still make your decision between what options you have and still be a person of substance and say, look, no, this one's off base. This is a horrible idea. This is something that's straight out of Karl Marx. From each according to his need, from each according to his ability. Well, the landlords are rich, the people are renting are poor. Well, let's just go ahead and take that house and give it to them. Jack.
Amen.
Jessica, as we're running long, let's get to your closing thought.
I just wanted to shout out to Congressman Massey. Of course, everyone, if you have a television or Facebook, you saw the snafu of sorts with Pelosi and getting her hair done and everything. And he just trolls the heck out of his colleagues sometimes. And I love it. And he marked himself safe on Facebook last week from being set up by a salon. And he said, I'm so glad my wife cuts my hair. And he checked in as safe. And I just love him. It was nice to see somebody have a sense of humor about everything too, because it is infuriating to watch a congresswoman, or Speaker of the House, play the game of rules for thee, but not for me. So.
Yeah. And cameras everywhere is changing a lot of that. And a lot of these politicians are starting to learn that humor reaches so much better than being shrill. That this sort of stuff gets shared and shared and shared and shared, and his name is reaching out because he had a sense of humor about it. It's still a jab at her.
Yeah,
it's still
it's still accurate.
yeah, absolutely, it's accurate. It's great, but the fact that you can do it as a joke and it illustrate her absurdity with humor is so much better than standing up on CNN and going, well, and getting all indignant about it. Make a joke. And that plays way better than being shrill and offended. Happy Labor Day. It is Labor Day as it drops. Enjoy your communist holiday. Go out and spend some money with somebody. Go drink some beer. Go spend some money at a capitalist establishment just to rebel against the idea of Labor Day. So for Jessica Szilagyi, for Eric Cumby, for Big Daddy Unlimited, our sponsor, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.